Welcome back to part 2 of our Pong game that we're creating with Pygame. In the last video, we set up the basic template for the Pygame, and then we created a class for our paddle, and also a class for our ball. So in this video, we're going to get started by actually drawing these objects on the screen. So let's go ahead and dive in and get right to it. Alright, so to get started, we're going to start drawing some objects on the screen. So what we have already is we have the two classes. We have a class for our paddle and also a class for our ball. But we saw from last time that when we run our code, even though we have our classes, that's not actually creating any objects yet. So to start creating objects that show up on the screen, what we're going to do down below our ball class is we're going to actually create these objects. So the first thing I'm going to do is create one of the paddles. So to do that, I'm going to say paddle 1, since we're going to have two different paddles, and this is going to be equal to our class. So our class is paddle with a capital P, just like that. So what we just did is we used this class paddle to create an object called paddle1, and then what we have to do next is tell it where on the screen to put this object. So to do that, we're going to say paddle1 dot rect. So what we're referencing on this part here is the rectangle part of the class. And what we can do is this rectangle part has an x coordinate and a y coordinate. So we're going to say paddle.rect.x. So this will set the x coordinate, and we're going to place that at 25. We also need to set the y coordinate, so we're going to say paddle1. Oh, and I forgot to do it here. There we go, and paddle1.rect.y, and we're going to set the y value to 225. So what this is going to do, on our screen, it's going to set it at x equal to 25, which will be close to the left-hand side. And then the y is 225, so that will be around the center. Let's go ahead and create paddle2. So to do that, we're going to say paddle2 is equal to the same class. So we're using the same class to create two different objects. And what I can do is I can set different x and y coordinates for this. So I can say paddle2 dot rect dot x. So for this one, we want to set it near the right side of the screen. To do that, we're going to set the x equal to 715. And for the y, we're going to set it in the middle of the screen as well. So that'll be the same 225 that we did above. So we're going to say paddle2 dot rect dot y, and this is going to be equal to the same 225. So what this is going to do, it's creating two different objects using one class. For the first object, I'm setting its coordinates to 25 and 225. For the second object, I'm setting its coordinates to 715 and 225. Okay, we're going to create another object for the ball. So to do that, I'm going to say Pong, but you can call it whatever you want to. So if you'd rather call it ball, that's fine. So I'm going to say Pong is equal to my ball class. All right, and just like above, I need to set its x and y coordinates. So I'm going to say Pong.x, .rect.x, and I want this to appear in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to say 375 for the x value, and then for the y value, I'm going to set it to 225. Actually, let's do 250. Okay, so where I'm getting these numbers, so 375 is half of 750, and then 250 is half of 500. By setting it to this, it's not going to be exactly in the center of the screen, because the length of the ball is 10 by 10, so it's going to be a little bit off-centered, but it's not going to be very noticeable. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a group that we can put all these sprites into. So to do that, I'm going to say all underscore sprites, and this is just a variable name, so this can be whatever you want to. This is going to be equal to Pygame dot sprite with a lowercase s dot group with an uppercase G. And then I'm going to be adding all the different objects that I made into this group. And I do that by saying all underscore sprites dot add. And then inside the parentheses, I'll just list the name of the objects. So I have paddle 1, I have paddle 2, and then I have Pong. After that, the next step we're going to do is we're going to be creating a function that'll be used to redraw all the objects on the screen. So anytime the position of an object changes, it has to redraw the screen. So to do that, we're going to define a function, and we're going to call it redraw. Inside the function, the first thing we're going to say is when.fill. Inside the parentheses, we're going to use the color black. So this is going to fill the whole screen with black. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to say all underscore sprites dot draw. Inside the parentheses, it's what the surface is going to draw it on. So the surface we're drawing on is the window. And then after that, to update the screen, we're going to say Pygame dot display dot update. Okay, and at this point, if we try to run our code, we still have nothing on the screen. The reason for that, we have to add our redraw function inside of the main loop. So down here, this is going to be in line with the for loop. We're going to just call the redraw function like that. So every time this loop runs, it's going to call the redraw function, and then it'll do everything that we put inside of here. So later on in the video, we're going to be adding some more stuff to this as we get into the movement of the paddles and the ball. But for now, if we run our code, we have our objects on the screen. So we have our two different paddles and then our ball in the near center of the screen. So next, let's go ahead and work on making the paddles move when we press arrow keys or the W and S key. So for the paddle on the right side of the screen, we're going to be using the up and the down arrow. And then for the paddle on the left side, we'll be using the W and the S key. So to do that, we're going to move inside of our while run loop. And then the next part is going to be also in line with the for loop. We're going to say key is equal to Pygame dot get underscore pressed. So this will get whatever key is being pressed. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use some if statements. So the first one, we're going to say if key, and then square brackets, Pygame dot uppercase K, then underscore W. So this will be if the W key is pressed. When that happens, what I want to do is move the paddle up and down. So if that happens, what I want to do is move the paddle up. And to do that, what we need to do is change the X position of our. So whenever that happens, whenever the W key is pressed, I want to move the paddle that's on the left side of the screen up. And to do that, what I'm going to be doing is changing the paddle's Y position. So the Y position of the paddle is going to control its up and down movement. So what I need to do, the paddle on the left side of the screen, that's paddle 1. So first I'm going to reference that paddle. So I'm going to say paddle 1 dot, and then I'm going to be changing its rectangle position. And then the particular part of that is the Y position. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to say plus equals, and then we're going to have to see if it's a positive change or a negative change. So the way Pygame works, the upper left hand corner is 0, 0, and the bottom part of this, since our screen height is 500, the top part would be 0, the bottom part would be 500. So if the paddle is moving up, it's getting closer to 0, so the numbers are getting smaller and smaller. So what I should put here is minus, and then the number of pixels that's going to be changing by. So if you do minus 10, every time the W key is pressed or held, it's going to change by 10 pixels going up. Let's go ahead and try that out and see if we're working. And it says I have a error, so it says module Pygame has no attribute get underscore pressed. And what I forgot was right here next to Pygame, it should be pygame.key.pressed. So let's go ahead and run it again. Okay, so now on this left side here, when I press the up arrow, the paddle moves up. So the next thing we're going to do is whenever I press the down key, whenever I press the S key, I want the paddle to move down. So it's going to be very similar. So we're going to use another if statement. So we're going to say if key square bracket Pygame dot K then underscore S. So this is when the S key is pressed. I'm going to say paddle1 dot rect dot Y and then plus equals 10. All right, let's go ahead and try this now. So now we should have, whenever I press the W key, it should move up. When I press the S key, it moves down. All right, let's just go ahead and continue. So now we're going to be working on the paddle that's on the right side of the screen, and we called that one paddle 2. So we're going to say if key square bracket Pygame dot K underscore up. So this is capital U and capital P. If this happens, I'm going to be changing paddle 2 dot Y, and same as above, so it's going to be plus equals negative 10. Okay, if key Pygame dot K underscore down, all capitals, paddle 2 dot rect dot Y plus equals 10. Okay, so let's go ahead and try it out. So now we should have movement for both. So when I press the W and S, that moves the left paddle. When I press up and down, it moves the right paddle. Okay, and just to make this code a little bit cleaner, since we're using the same number over and over again, let's go ahead and create a variable that stores this information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move up to the top here. And right below the two paddles, what I'll do is I'll say paddle underscore speed, and I'll set this equal to 10. That way in the future, if you want to change the paddle speed, you can just change this number once instead of having to change it 4 times down below. And now down below, we'll just have to update these. So this will be paddle speed. And then I'll just copy this and paste it for the other ones. And also for these negative signs, if you'd rather do minus equals, that works as well. All right, so let's go ahead and run our code just to make sure everything is still working. Okay, left paddle's working, right paddle's working, and let's go ahead and just change that speed up above so you can see what the effect would be. So let's go from 10 to, let's make it obvious, so let's go to 50. If I rerun my program, now my paddles are moving much faster. All right, so now that we have the paddle movement, let's go ahead and work on ball movement. So to do that, we're going to be heading under our if statements right here. So the last one is the down arrow. So below that one, what we're going to say is Pong dot rect dot X. So the X position will be changing the left and right movement. And then down below, we're going to say Pong dot rect dot Y, and that'll change the up and down movement. So on the other side of these equal signs, we need to figure out how we're going to move this though. So to do that, we're going to be adding a few things to our Pong class. So scrolling up to the ball class, and down below here, we're going to be creating a speed part of this ball. So to do that, we're going to say self dot speed, and we're going to set this equal to 10. So if you notice, in this case, I put the speed as part of the class, but for the paddle, I put it as a separate variable. Both ways are fine. It just depends on how you want to do it. I'm just showing you that you can do it in 2 different ways. So instead, if you want to put this variable as part of the class, that would be totally fine and it would work just the same. All right, so in addition to the speed, we also need to know what direction the ball is going. So to do that, I'm going to say self dot dx. So this will stand for the change in x value. So this will be either 1 or -1 depending on the direction. So in the beginning we're going to set it to 1, and then we're going to do self dot dy. So this will be the change in the y position, and we're going to set that equal to 1 as well. Okay, so now that we've added those to the class, we're going to scroll back down. So now for the x part of it, what we're going to do is we're going to say Pong dot speed. So if I just set it to this, every time it runs through the loop, it's going to say the x position is equal to the speed, which will be 10, but that's not actually going to move anything yet. So what we need to do is, instead of saying equal, we're going to say plus equal. Okay, so what this does, it sets the x position and adds the speed to it. So if I did that, the new x position would be whatever it is currently plus 10. And if I do the same for the y, and we're going to say Pong dot speed, and so it'll do the same thing. So for the y position of the ball, it'll add 10 to it each time it runs through the loop. So let's go ahead and run our code and see how this looks. So now I have a ball that moves to the bottom of the screen, but since I don't have any collision set up, it just continues through the bottom of the screen. If I want to make the ball slower, I can scroll up to the class and change this 10 to a smaller number. So let's try 3. And if I rerun the program, now we have a much slower ball. Alright, so that's what we're going to stop with today. In the next video, we'll be setting up collisions. So what we're going to do is, whenever the ball touches the edge of the screen here or any of the sides, we'll make it bounce. And also, if it touches the paddle, we'll make it change direction. So I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one.